Welcome to the latest episode of our podcast series for financial advisors. Today's episode is Next Gen Success, a masterclass in building trust and credibility in a $7 billion multifamily office. It's a conversation with Wen Nottebohm, Managing Director and Wealth Advisor at Cresset. I'm Mindy Diamond, and this is the Diamond Podcast for financial advisors. At Diamond Consultants, we help elite advisors identify the right environment for their businesses to thrive, whether that's at a wirehouse, boutique, or independent firm. With nearly 3 decades of experience, we've guided thousands of advisors and represented more than $250 billion in assets transitioned. And each year, 1 in 4 advisors managing $1 billion or more who change firms are our clients. Our process is education-driven and based on building relationships, starting as your strategic partner well before you're even thinking of a move. To schedule a confidential conversation, call us at 908-879-1002. Wondering why advisors change firms and where they're headed? Are transition deals going up or down? Those very questions and more inspired us to create our annual Advisor Transition Report. It's the award-winning, data-driven resource designed for advisors that connects the dots between the motivations around movement and the firm's appetite for top talent. Arm yourself with the knowledge you need to make smart decisions. Download your copy at diamond-consultants.com/transition report. There's a pretty well-defined way most advisory careers unfold. You spend the early years learning the business, supporting senior advisors, and gradually working your way into more responsibility. And when it comes to ultra-high net worth clients, that timeline tends to stretch even longer, given the complexity and expectations that come with those relationships. But the path isn't always linear, and in some cases, it moves faster than people expect, especially when the focus shifts from simply accumulating experience to developing real expertise and a seat at the table early on. That's part of what makes Wen Nottebohm's perspective so interesting. Wen is part of the Berman Capital Advisors team at Cresset, a $230 billion plus multifamily office. The Berman team manages roughly $7 billion in assets, and Wen herself is advising on $1.6 billion for ultra-high net worth families and entrepreneurs. What stands out is not just the scale, but how early in her career Wen stepped into that level of responsibility and what it actually required to make that work. As you'll hear, this conversation offers a very real look at what it means to build a wealth management business at a younger age, particularly when the client base is sophisticated and the margin for error is small. It's also a useful lens for any advisor thinking about how credibility is earned today, because the expectations both from clients and within firms are shifting. We also spend time on what ultra-high net worth clients truly value and how the next generation of advisors is approaching advice differently. We talk about where AI is beginning to influence the dynamic, not as a replacement for the advisor, but as something that is quietly raising the level of conversation and forcing advisors to be sharper, more prepared, and more thoughtful in how they show up. And ultimately, it raises a broader question about whether the traditional timeline for building an advisory practice still holds, or whether it's already being rewritten in real time. This episode is a masterclass for next-gen advisors and seasoned advisors alike, identifying what it really takes to build $1 billion business in a real changing environment. So let's get to it. Wen, I am so grateful you are joining me today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. I've listened to your podcast for years, so I'm absolutely thrilled to be here.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. Appreciate that. So you have a really interesting background, and most importantly, a pretty impressive pedigree. I know having gone to MIT and Wharton. Walk us through that background a little, just briefly, and what brought you to the wealth management world.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's funny. Life never really takes you where you think it's going to take you. I started out thinking that I wanted to go in medicine, but ultimately ended up studying business and economics. I was first drawn to wealth management, actually having learned about it through a coffee chat. It was completely serendipitous. At the time, I don't think wealth management was really well known, and it wasn't something that was really heavily recruited for on campus. But through the coffee chat, I learned more about the human impact, the analytical work, the ability to work with clients and really help them achieve their goals. And that really spoke to me and my skill set and my interests. And so that's what brought me to the wealth management industry.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting comment. I think you're right. It wasn't heavily recruited for. The campus recruiters that came to college years ago were recruiting for investment banking, first most prestigious, sales and trading, second most prestigious, and a distant third, oftentimes not even represented at all, was wealth management. So, what made you realize that it was, in fact, more of a sophisticated career path than you first thought?
So I actually really didn't know, right? When you're a senior in college, I don't think you have a lot of knowledge in what the various industries within finance are. And I too applied to MSM banking, sales and trading, consulting, executive management. I did all of those. And at the time, it was right after the financial crisis. So there was a lot of applicants for not a lot of jobs. And I was very lucky in that I actually received an offer, I think, in all of those various parallels. And when I was thinking through my offers, I really didn't feel like any one of those offers had exactly what I wanted, which was I think investment banking is analytical. Sales and trading is also falls into that category. But I think having definable impact where you're actually working with clients day one, still having that analytical work and really having to pay attention to the markets every day was really exciting for me.
Yeah. Okay. So you started your first job in wealth management was with Morgan Stanley. So tell us a little bit about how long you were there. What did you take from that? Because clearly, in the world of wealth management, your career took an entirely different path, really winding your way to the independent space, but not independent by yourself. And a lot of advisors do that. But I'm wondering how long you were at Morgan and what you learned. What did you take from the experience?
Yeah. As a Morgan Stanley for a little under 2 years, I started out as an analyst, always hired right into private wealth. And I think Morgan Stanley is a great training ground. You get put into an analyst class of essentially 200. You all train together in New York, and you all learn the Excel classes. You're sitting with your investment banking analyst, sitting with a capital markets analyst, and you all learn together before you get segregated into your then like training for that specific sub for private wealth, for example. And I think it taught you a lot of things. I think working at Morgan Stanley, you learn how to operate in a very fast-paced environment. You learn how to think about the markets, you learn to have a view. You learn how to communicate with clients, regardless of kind of what seat you sit in. But I think also very importantly, because the analyst class is across various divisions, you start building relationships. And even in your day-to-day job, if I needed to find an answer in this division, or I needed to find a division or an answer or a question in this division, you already had contacts. And I feel like that was really important, especially in a large organization where the person you need an answer from isn't necessarily sitting next to you. Building those contacts early on was really important.
Yeah, that's an interesting comment. It's not only about the context that's valuable, but the truth of the matter is, in today's environment, there are very few firms that offer a really good training ground. So, people that want to get in, young folks who want to get into wealth management, have two ways to train. One is to go to a big firm that still has a solid training program. And in that case, Morgan's is tops. I agree with you. And two, is to go the independent route and find a mentor that really is going to take you under their wing and teach you the business. So, talk to us a little bit about that. You spent 2 years at Morgan Stanley, got what you could out of it, ultimately wound up where you are today, which was Berman Capital Advisors, which ultimately became part of Cresset. We will get to that. In between, after leaving Morgan, you went to AQR. Talk to us a little bit about why you left Morgan and what drew you to AQR and what you learned there.
So when I was at Morgan Stanley, I was in private wealth, but I really focused much more on risk management. And so it was less client facing. My clients were really the advisors. I really enjoyed the job. But at the end of the day, I think I wanted to be closer to clients. I was recruited to work at AQR as an internal product specialist. And so I was still working with clients, but more in the way of through a relationship manager where I was brought in to explain to the end client, like, why did we make certain tactical moves? Why did the portfolio do this, et cetera. And I think the learning there was, I think it really broadened my view into different types of asset classes. When I worked at Morgan Stanley, it was much more the traditional equities and fixed income. And then AQR obviously is a very strong player in the alternative space. So really learning and honing my skill set again in the alternative space, how that adds to a client portfolio, contributing a different form of alpha to the portfolio. That's what really AQR helped me broaden my horizons on.
Yeah. Okay, so how long were you there? And then you went to Berman Capital Advisor.
I was there for less than a year, and then I went to business school.
Question for you. A lot of young folks, people newer to the business, feel that they need the pedigree, the big firm name on their resume in order to have an impact. It's probably more unusual to find someone to join, go right from business school, young in the business, to the independent space. So tell us a little bit about Berman Capital Advisors and what drew you to them. We've had Justin Berman on the podcast a couple of times, built a really interesting business.
Yeah. I found Berman completely serendipitously. I actually decided to move to Atlanta for my husband's job. We met in business school and we decided to move down to Atlanta together for his job. So I re-recruited to be in Atlanta. And when I came down here, I talked to Goldman, I talked to JP Morgan, and found Justin Berman in the alumni directory and had coffee chats and interviews with all three. And at the time, I was really drawn to the open architecture, the unbiased advice, the entrepreneurial spirit of being with an RIA like Berman Capital, which is very different from the other two opportunities that I was looking at. And as part of a smaller firm at the time, Berman Capital was sub 2 billion in assets under management. It was a smaller team of 10 to 12 people. And I thought I was ever going to take a risk in building something. It was going to be in my 20s. And so I was really excited. I was really bought into the vision that Justin painted.
Yeah. So I love that. And I think that this episode will be a masterclass or a teachable moment for a lot of next gen advisors, young folks either thinking about getting into wealth management or just next gen advisors. I want to get to what it's like building a business, building a wealth management business when you're in your 20s. But it's interesting. So first of all, for those unfamiliar or who didn't listen to any of the Justin Berman interviews we've done, Justin came from Goldman Sachs. Talk to us a little bit, unpack for me a little what you just said about the picture he painted or the story he told about the impact you would have working there versus going to a firm like Goldman or JP Morgan.
Yeah, I think working as an advisor in a smaller firm, you get to wear a lot of hats. And so you really think about not just investment planning, but estate planning, tax planning. I'd be working with, obviously, starting with some of the smaller clients as I learned the trade and how to give advice and how to help clients through whatever issues they're working through to help them reach their goal. And over time, that became more complex clients. And I think having that opportunity at a very young age is very unusual in this market. And I think having had him as a mentor, he is one of the most substantive advisors I've ever met, where it's not a sell, right? For Justin, it's all about finding solutions. Whether you decide to become a client or not, he's there to help you. And I think learning from him was probably the best thing that could have happened to me in my career.
Yeah. So, the point you're making is that for you, it was much more about the person you'd be learning from and the impact you were able to make more in a smaller firm than in a giant firm that drew you to it. And I think that's the calculus that young or old people go through. People need to go through. What do I want to be when I grow up? How do I want to live my business life? And in what environment? Because there's a world of difference between doing it at a firm like Berman Capital Advisors, ultimately Cresset, or doing it at Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan or Morgan Stanley. So again, for those unfamiliar, and hopefully this episode will make people want to listen to the other interviews we've done with Justin Berman. I first interviewed Justin when he was Berman Capital Advisors. Several years ago, he sold to Cresset And we interviewed him again just after the transition, where he talked about what drew him to Cresset. Tell me from your perspective a couple of things. One, tell us a little bit about Cresset for those unfamiliar, what it's like to work there. And two, what it felt like being recruited by Berman and then going through the transition to Cresset.
Yeah. So Cresset is a boutique multifamily office built by clients for clients. Our tagline is wealth optimized, life elevated. And really, we are trying to maximize clients' financial goals for sure, but helping them with everything else in between so that we're giving them time back. They can really focus on the things that matter for them. And so Cresset really focuses on family office services. So, yes, investment management is extremely important, but also financial planning, tax planning, estate planning, banking and lending, family governance education, lifestyle services. It's the whole gambit. It's a whole suite of things that a client might need. So when we were evaluating for Berman back in the day, we were very heavily in investments. We were very heavily into alternative investments. So when we think about a typical client portfolio, it's probably 30 to 40% in alternatives. And I think that was ahead of the time at the time. But we also saw where the puck was going, and that's clients wanted a one-stop shop where they felt like everything was coordinated, whether it was taxes or their estate plan, that the person they're talking to had a full view of their financial life and so could provide that holistic advice. When we were Berman, we thought about building out our own family office service team, but that would have taken a really long time and it's hard to recruit that right talent. And so when we were looking for a partner, Cresset really rose up because of this family office services that was really their strong suit. And it was a strategic partner. I think through Cresset, we maintained our independence. Cresset was employee, it's still to this day a majority employee and client owned. It's really that alignment of interest. And they also had a great investment platform that I think we added to, but we brought that additional family office service for our clients.
Speaking from the perspective of Justin, who was a business owner, the calculus that so many business owners go through, they become independent. They break away from the likes of the Goldmans and Morgan Stanleys because they have an entrepreneurial spirit. They want to build something that's their own. They want to build a legacy. But very often they come to a crossroads, roads like you're describing, where they can either build it or they can join forces with another firm to leverage it elsewhere. That's what Justin decided to do. It was expensive and hard to build, and rather leverage what somebody else had already built, and 1 + 1 = 3 or more. I think that's really interesting, and a lot of people talk about that. Talk to us a little bit about how independent Berman is under the Crescent umbrella, and ultimately how independent you are. What is your role in the organization? What does that look like?
One of the great things about Cresset is we want everyone rowing in the same direction. So it's not just a bunch of roll-ups doing their own thing. We want to be one firm so that what a client experiences here in Atlanta is the same that they're experiencing in San Francisco. Understanding that obviously clients have different needs and different things, goals that they want to achieve, but that at the end of the day, the advice we're providing is the best advice of the firm. And so for me, I am an advisor in Atlanta. We specialize in certain things. For example, I feel we specialize in family office clients and entrepreneurs and a lot of complexity, multi-generational money. That's what we specialize in. But at the end of the day, the investment advice comes from the top of that, from our investment team in thinking about the macro strategy and thinking about bottoms up, what is the best manager for a particular strategy we're thinking about. But we all want to provide that same advice for clients. I think what Cresset provides is guardrails for us to do our best work for our clients.
Do you manage your own individual book of business, or you are part of the Berman team?
I'm part of the Berman team.
Got it. And for perspective, can you give our listeners a sense of how much the Berman team is managing in assets these days?
The Berman team today manages about $7 billion, works with about 300 or so households. I personally manage about $1.6 billion and work with about 40 clients.
Okay. So switch gears a little. Let's pivot to building a client base and then servicing a client base. A client base that, as you say, you specialize in is really dealing with family office or ultra high net worth clients. My question for you is this. You were young, in your 20s, as you say, when you really began to get in front of clients and to begin to build a wealth management business. That's hard. It's hard to build a wealth management business at any age, but really hard to do when you're young and you're going after sophisticated client base. So, how did you do it? What was your secret sauce? What could others learn from you about having the confidence, the courage, and the distinction, the secret sauce to really feel worthy to go after those ultra sophisticated clients?
Yeah. As I mentioned, my foray into wealth management wasn't like a traditional advisor where I wasn't pounding the table, cold calling, networking. I was lucky in that Justin needed a partner and I really helped fill that role. I think for me at a young age, first of all, Justin gave me a lot of credibility in those client meetings. But I think too is having the knowledge to actually back that up, right? He can open doors for you, but at the end of the day, you have to prove your knowledge and worth and that you deserve a seat at that table. And so for me, it was honing my craft, knowing what's going on in a client portfolio, having a view on the markets, giving clients the advice that I think they were really looking for in a simplified way that they can understand.
And I think you say it's benignly, but I think there's a couple of things, and I thank you for sharing that. One is that I think early on, it's very important for a younger advisor without a lot of experience, and it's not even about age, just less experience, to shadow or partner with or present with somebody more senior, more experienced, with more credibility, because you're leveraging somebody else's credibility. I think that's really smart, and it's a good best practice. The second thing is that you fake it until you make it. I run a multifamily business myself, and my son, particularly my older son, Lewis, who's now the CEO of our business, was young when he came into the business. He was in his late 20s also. And what I said to him is, for every year that you are younger than the prospect or the client you are sitting in front of, you have to be that much smarter, better, and more sophisticated in your craft. So you don't have to be their age. You don't have to have as much money of them. You don't have to have any of that. But you need to be even more of an expert. You need to do more homework, be more prepared, be more experienced, show up better with more of a reservoir of content and information and knowledge than anybody would ever expect. So essentially, instead of killing them with kindness, you're killing them with knowledge and sophistication. And I think that's what you're saying, that you showed up really well prepared and you faked it until you made it. You think that's accurate?
I think that is accurate. And over time, you learn a lot, right? We work with very sophisticated clients. We want to be the quarterback. So we work with their estate attorneys, work with their accountants. We learn so much just throughout the process of working with one family. Like, for example, I think our foray into working with large family offices was the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 didn't allow you to deduct investment management fees and accounting fees anymore. But at around the same time, there was a case that came out, the Lender Bagel case, that affirmed that a family office, if you're running your own family office managing assets for your family, that is a trade or business. And so you can then deduct these associated investment management fees and accounting fees. We had a large client who had a liquidity event who made sense for them to do it, to set up their own family office. So we went through the whole process with the firms that were really involved in the Lender Bagel case in setting up this single family office for a client. We went through the entire process. And so we really, through that, essentially became experts in understanding when does it make sense for a client to launch their own family office, what goes into it. We help them think through the expenses, the ongoing maintenance, the complexity, and bring in the right partners for them to make sure that it's set up correctly. There's a lot of ways to set up a family office, but I think there are more correct ways than others in setting up family offices. So making sure they don't fall into the pitfalls.
Yeah. You became an expert in an important niche and learned everything you could about it, and that's the key for sure. So, with that perspective in mind, what do you think it is that ultra high net worth clients value most or want most from their advisor?
I think it's trust and clarity. I think with ultra high net worth clients, there's just a lot of complexity in their lives. And oftentimes they don't have the time or the attention to dedicate as much as they would like, maybe to their investments. And so helping simplify things and help them make confident decisions, I think at the end of the day is what they're looking for. And how do you make those confident decisions? It's when you have all those pieces that you can present to the client and say, these are the pros and cons, and this is how they can make an informed decision.
But wouldn't most advisors say the same thing? I mean, I think those are wonderful words and important words, but I would imagine any advisor worth their salt would say the same thing. We provide trust and clarity, alignment, good relationship management. So, what ultimately is the secret sauce? What is it that you think really differentiates you and Berman from all the rest?
I think it is really being there for the client when they need us the most. There are moments of trust and moment of truth, which our founders love to talk about. And I think when we're there for the client when they need it the most, if there's even now when markets are tumultuous, they're volatile, we're staying in front of our clients, we're really helping them not only just in the investments, but even their kids, their family in kind of every aspect of their financial lives. We tell clients we want to be your first call. And it doesn't need to be investment related. We might not know all the answers every time, but we're going to find the right partner to help you answer that question. And so, and we deliver that, right? Like it is talk until clients really feel that and you deliver that value. And there are clients I've worked with for well over a decade where I truly feel like we have been there for their family when they've needed us the most and they truly trust us and take our advice when it comes to markets like these or whatever it is.
So, talk to us then about business development. One, is that something you yourself are responsible for, or is it something that Justin is more responsible for and you manage more of the relationship?
I think historically it's been that Justin has brought in more of the new business and we've been responsible, we being other advisors on the team, been more responsible for like the ongoing maintenance of the client relationship, portfolio management, et cetera. But that has really changed over time, especially as we've worked with these clients again for a long period of time. We really built a lot of trust and they referred us a lot of new business. And when we think about even how Berman Capital prior to merging with Cresset, a lot of our business came from referrals. We weren't trying to grow. We were trying to do a really good job for our existing clients. And so a lot of our new business were friends of existing clients who really felt like their friends could benefit from what we were offering.
I love that. And tell me how you articulate that. I think one of the hardest things that any business owner or business needs to do is to communicate their value proposition in a way that makes it sound unique and authentic. So, again, there are probably a lot of advisors that will say, my value proposition is providing trust and clarity. How do you articulate that or demonstrate that? I get how you do it for an existing client. You show up and do the best job you can do, and they love you for it. But how do you articulate that from a business development perspective?
Oftentimes when clients refer us other clients, it's already given us a lot of cachet and they trust their friend and their referral. That conversation's a lot easier. We also do a lot of upfront work. Like we are not afraid to put in the effort upfront. So as I mentioned earlier on, Justin is very solutions oriented. It's not about the sale. It's how can I help you with whatever problem it is you're facing? Like, why are you looking for a new advisor? What is not working for you? What are you going through right now that's top of your mind, whether that's investment related or not? And how can we help even if you don't sign on? Let me introduce you to an estate attorney who can help you set up these trusts and move these assets out of your estate prior to the sale of the business. Let's minimize your taxes. Think about these things. We're demonstrating a lot of our value upfront without charging. And I think, again, it's trying to solve a problem and not about how can I sell this client.
So, even in a referral, you're right, you're leveraging credibility that somebody else has already told you have. But how about if you found yourself, you were at a restaurant or at a party and you ran into someone at the bar who you want to articulate your value proposition to? What would that sound like?
Yeah, I think it goes to our punchline, which is wealth optimized, life elevated. Like we want to not only help you with the financial life, but also help you with everything else in between and give you that gift of time to focus on what really matters.
Do you think that elsewhere could an advisor at Merrill Lynch or UBS or anywhere for that matter say the same thing if you work for a big firm?
I think it is different. I think for Cresset, and what I really love about Cresset is that there is true alignment, right? We're majority client and employee owned. We're built by clients for clients. We really are trying to deliver what we think and what we know that clients want. We have scale, but where we're large enough to matter, but we're small enough to be nimble. And I don't think wirehouses can say that. And for us, we talk about family office services all the time because we want to, again, try to be that one stop shop for clients, really solve for everything they might need. But we also walk the walk. So a lot of firms will say, oh, we have family office services. But when you peel back the onion, it's like they have one person in family governance, they have three people who are wealth strategists. There is, I think, of our firm, probably 25% of our employees are in family office services. So we truly are trying to support that and continue to build that out for clients because we think that is extremely important. And so I think there's areas where we are truly differentiated. I know we talk about fiduciaries and that client first thinking, and that's probably true for a lot of RIAs. They say that. But again, I think the demonstrated value over time where we truly walk the walk, we're not just talking. And I think that has really resonated with clients. And again, a lot of our new business come from referrals because we have truly delivered what we said we're going to deliver.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's probably very well said. Let me ask you a question. When you sit across from a family making a major financial decision, whether it be a prospect who says, we're about to embark on X, or an existing client that is about to make a big financial decision, where do you feel the most pressure to protect them or to prove your value? And how do you do that?
To protect them. I think if you come in with the client first mentality, what can I do for this client and what is in their best interest? I think that really shines through and that really gives you credibility for the future and for the relationship. Because at the end of the day, what a client wants is a trusted partner, and you have to demonstrate that from day one. This is what we think you should be considering. These are pitfalls. These are the things you should be asking your competitors. And even with Cresset, these are the things you should be thinking about when you're evaluating us versus someone else.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is it's always got to be put your own financial gain, your own self aside. It's always got to be what's in the best interest of the client. And I think that the most successful people in business really adopt that ethos. They say, regardless of whether you choose me to be your advisor, or regardless of whether I make money on this transaction or the ultimate outcome of your decision, I am always putting your best interests first. And it's people can say that. It's the very definition of being a fiduciary, but not everybody really believes it in their soul. And clients can smell it. They can sniff it out when somebody's really being authentic and genuine about that.
Completely agree.
Talk to me, Wen, about being a woman in this business. So there's lots of talk about the lack of women in the business. You are obviously one that has, again, a very impressive resume, could have gone anywhere. How did being a woman early on in your career help you or hurt you? And how do you think about being a female in a largely male-dominated field affects you today?
I think there's definitely more of an awareness and that need for a differentiated view, especially around the great wealth transfer, right? As a lot more of the wealth moves into spouses' hands or the next generation. And I'm really proud of the fact that Cresset is almost 50% split, 50% females and 50% males. And Susie Cranston actually just was announced as CEO effective in April 15th. And so even when I look at like our management team, there's a lot of really wonderful women leaders to look up to. I entered the industry when I was young, but I also think now that it's actually a really big benefit because clients actually want an advisor who can work with them, but also work with their children and have that multi-generational timeline. For me, when you're younger, I think you also have to build your own confidence and find your own path. And I think, again, it goes back to that mastering your craft, having a point of view, having a sense of urgency, and also just raising your hand before you're 100% ready. Because you might never be 100% ready. But growth happens beyond your comfort zone. And I think that's so important for younger women or younger advisors in general.
Fake it till you make it. I think that's really the bottom line. When someone asks you to do something, say yes, even if you don't feel 100% ready. But, I think one of the things that's interesting that you're talking about is there's a saying in this business, you can't be what you can't see. And so if you work in an organization where there are few women at the top, going back to the female angle, it's harder to gain your footing and your confidence. But you're working in an organization who has really put their money where their mouth is. Not only are their statistics good about the number of women in the business, but the CEO is even a female or about to be a female, and that's pretty extraordinary. So talk to me about your perceived career path when you are an employee, an advisor working under the Berman umbrella that is owned ultimately by Cresset. But what is your career path? What would you like it to look like? Where does it go from here?
My career path is working with clients. And so over time, that becomes more complexity with more complex families, which I think I already am doing. But for me, it's really continuing to grow with those families, deepening that relationship, working with not only the original founder or CEO, but working with their adult children as they grow, or even younger children as they grow, teaching them financial literacy, financial stewardship. When I think about this business, it's not transactional, it's a very intimate business. You really get to know a client, all their goals, their family members. You're there for all of their big life events. And for me, it is about growing with that family, growing with that founder, but also growing with that family and helping to continue add value over time. We're very lucky in that a lot of our clients are very philanthropic. And so helping them amplify their legacy, helping them think through their impact, whether that's in the family or in the community, I think that is very important to me and also to my clients. And that is really what I want to continue deepening over time.
Well, you talk about the ability to work with clients' offspring, the younger generation. So we talked, what do ultra high net worth clients value? What do the younger folks value?
It's interesting. They are in a very different phase of life. Even the investments they're thinking about is different from the maybe Gen 2 or Gen 1. They're more into cryptos. They're more into some of these investment spaces that I think the family members might not have really wanted to invest much in because it's a lot more risky. They're thinking about if they want to start a business, if they want to buy a house, if they want to have children, what does that look like? And even for some of the younger kids, it's what career path do I want to take? And we have a lot of those conversations around how do you become a financial steward of your family's assets? And what buckets do those fall in? And how do you think about the family's vision and mission is something that we also work largely across generations with. Because oftentimes the younger generations might not understand the original, why was this wealth created? What is it for? And helping facilitate those conversations for our clients has been extremely meaningful.
Yeah. How about in terms of AI and technology and the notion of interaction with a financial advisor? How do you think your younger generation clients think about it? And then how do you think about AI's impact on the industry in general?
I think they're much more informed. Like I can tell, like some of our clients will put their questions into Chat GPT and come to us a lot more informed. So, for example, I had a client who was thinking about hedging one of his individual stock positions. And he said, Gemini told me this and this. And we went through and discussed these options that Gemini gave. But because the bid ask spreads were so wide on those options, it actually didn't make sense, even though that's what ChatGPT told you or Gemini told you. And so I feel like the younger generation is loves to question. I think they're very curious. They're intellectually curious. They want to learn. And I think they come very prepared with questions. And I think to your point on how does AI affect that? I do think that AI will affect clients where there's not a lot of complexity, where they can just be in a traditional kind of 60% equities, 40% fixed income portfolio, where there's not a lot of moving pieces. I think for the space that we play in, where we're really strong in, where Crescent's very strong in, is again, families that are very complex. They have multiple entities. There's multiple goals for various entities. There's many different stakeholders. And that's hard to replace an advisor with who can offer true advice around that holistic view of the family.
Your lens into the next gen are essentially G2 or G3 of already very wealthy families. And so your next gen clients, or their goal is to protect, in a lot of cases, what's already been built or continue to be built. But when you think about next gen wealth or next gen emerging wealth in general? How do you think AI and this whole new world will impact? Let me phrase that another way. So, if you take it away from Cresset clients or Berman clients and think about it just in terms of next gen wealth or next gen emerging wealth, if you knew what you knew now about the emergence of AI and what's possible, do you think it would have impacted your decision to become an advisor and where you would practice?
I do not think it would have impacted my decision to become an advisor. I think I was very lucky again in my career and have always worked with more complex families. But if I were coming into the industry today as an advisor, I think that would impact where I would want to practice because again, I think in the less complex where you don't need a lot of estate planning, you don't need a lot of tax planning, I think that will be impacted by AI. But when you move up in complexity and where there's a lot of forces at play outside of just traditional basic investments, I think that trust factor, that knowledge factor, again, understanding kind of all the moving pieces really allows you to provide better holistic advice than what AI can give you today. We'll have clients who come in and say, I ran a financial plan in ChatGPT, and this is what it spits out. And we'll go through that plan and talk about how these assumptions don't make sense. Or this is a really great thing that they thought about. Let's talk about this. Why did you put that into your plan? And so it allows us to think about some things or have more meaningful, deeper conversations because the client has come more prepared. But I think there's a lot of assumptions and a lot of things that go into just a traditional, like if you just put it into AI, that might not be applicable to that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Important and profoundly impactful nuances that AI, at least as of today, is incapable of managing. I think that's probably a good way to say it. So, if you look at the future of Cresset under Susie's direction, the future of Berman under Cresset's ownership, and the future of Wen, if we were having this conversation 5 years from now, what do you think it all looks like?
I think from the perspective of Crescent, like we're going to continue to grow as a firm just organically, but we never want to lose that boutique feel. And so for Crescent, I think 5 years from now, we still want to be known as that boutique multifamily office. That is what we strive for, where every client feels like they are our most important client. Like we've been sitting around waiting for their email or their call all day. And for me, that's also the type of experience I want to deliver and continue to deliver for our clients, where we're delivering that thoughtful, high impact advice. We're a trusted partner, and that in 5 years, we'll have helped them get closer to their goal, whatever that is, whether it's financial, philanthropic, life goals, whatever it is. That's really what I hope to have accomplished in the next 5 years.
Do you think that ultimately you will, as Justin potentially succession plan, what do you think that looks like over the next 5 to 10 years?
Justin is still very young. I don't think he's even 50 yet. So I think he will be very much involved in the business for a long time to come. But I also think that he has done a very good job of empowering the advisors on our team and advisors across Crescent. He is such a great mentor, as I mentioned before. Like, I think he really elevates people. I think he really gives people opportunities. And for the advisors on the team, he has consistently made sure that the clients feel comfortable with the advisors they're working with, that it's not the Justin show. It is the team. This is everyone we're bringing to the table. And he does that across the firm. He's always there to provide advice. If an advisor has a question about XYZ opportunity or XYZ client has this issue, he is probably one of the first calls, I feel like, for advisors across the firm.
Interesting. I love it. Let me ask you a closing question. So, our listeners are diverse. There are people that are young and people that are on the back nine of their career. There are people that work as an advisor, people that work in management. There are advisors that work at big firms. There are advisors that work at boutique firms or in the independent space. So, generally speaking, if you were talking, first of all, to a young person listening, so let's say somebody that's in their early 30s who's really focused on building a business with going after also the ultra high net worth client, which is your specialty. What would be your number one piece of advice to them?
Always be client first. I think you have to have that client first mentality in order to succeed in this business. You have to be thinking about, okay, if I were this client, what would I want? What would be in my best interest. I think that's first and foremost in succeeding in this business.
Yeah. What would you say to the advisor who's anywhere at any point in their career, who's thinking about making a change? What would you say to them about how to think about where they would want to work or how they would want to work?
Again, I think it always comes back to the client and his business. So if you're thinking about moving or whatever it is, what does the move provide to your client? Why does this make them better? Why does this put them in a better situation? What are you solving for that also improves the life and the advice of that client?
That's a really good way to wrap this interview up because what has come through was not only your competence and your ability as an advisor, but the authenticity of that. It's not just words for you. Yes, Berman or Cresset provides trust and clarity, but you really live it and breathe it. And I think that that A comes through, and B, I think that clients and prospect alike, they can smell it. They know when it's real. And so it's no surprise that Justin saw something wonderful in you all those years ago. It's no surprise, knowing what I know about Justin, that you saw the same in him, and no surprise that your firm continues to be one of the leaders in the industry.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that. And one of our partners has this saying that he loves, and I love it, so I'm stealing it. But that price only matters in the, hold on, let me get this right.
Absent of value, right?
Exactly. David Karp, clients will see through if you're not sincere, if you're not delivering value. And at the end of the day, that's what really matters. And that's what we truly try to deliver for our clients.
Thank you. And look, you've got a long runway ahead of you. You're doing great things, and we look forward to hearing more from you.
Thank you so much, Mindy. I really appreciate it.
As a financial advisor, you hold yourself to the highest standards of integrity, honesty, and credibility. You are successful because you take your professional responsibilities seriously and are dedicated to your clients. But are you living your best business life? Are your goals aligned with your firm's, or could a better option exist? Should I Stay or Should I Go is a book written with you in mind. It's a self-guided journey that walks you through the key steps that we take with our advisor clients. This strategic thought process and roadmap to professional self-discovery is designed to help you ask the right questions and think critically and objectively, whether you're considering change or not. Learn how to get your copy at diamond-consultants.com/thebook.